Hey, you like cars? Listen, I'm right back where I should be, where I belong. You know what time it is. You know I'm driving right in. You know what we're here to do. I'm at my normal spot. I'm back in the podcast studio, aka the extra bedroom in the house. So, episode 64, CarQuicks podcast. You already know what we're here to do. So I'm not really going to waste much time, but how are y'all doing? How are you feeling? How are your loved ones, the family? You know my little intro. I always like to find out how everybody's doing, make sure they're doing well. Glad that you're tapping in. I'm glad that you are here to spend a little bit of time with me. If you're driving to work, if you're just listening to me at work, if you're listening to me while you're fixing a car, putting on the car part, looking at a video, welcome. It's me, Cameron Biggs, your host. This is a CarQuicks podcast, season 2, episode 64. We got much to talk about. So I'm going to drive right in. We're going to get right into some very interesting news. Well, let me not say very interesting. Interesting news, because then people are going to have their anticipations way up in the clouds. And really, it's just a normal week of car news, right? Like I said, we're gearing up for the SEMA Auto Show. This is kind of getting towards the end of the fourth quarter, getting to the end of the year. You know, holiday times, a lot of car releases come at the end, but exciting times regardless. I just came back from a road trip. I was in a GR Corolla all the way up to the East Coast coming from Texas. It was fantastic. Had my 2 boys with me. We drove for hours. We drove through the mountains. We drove through the byways, the highways, over rivers and bridges. It was a great time. Went to go see family in New Jersey. Shout out to them for those that are listening. My sisters and, you know, friends, family, people that we hadn't seen in years. Like, it was a real nostalgic reunion, right? So, anyways, what are we here to talk about? Aston Martin. Now, I've said this before, and I will continue to say it. Aston Martin hasn't missed on vehicle design since their inception. To be frank, they haven't made a miss, really. They haven't had an era of car where we're like, man, that era, it was getting rough, but they cleaned it up. They have always been clean. Now, you can argue maybe you prefer certain model years, but the consistency, the common denominator when it comes to Aston Martin is that they deliver on quality, elegant, sophisticated, sexy design, and they're back at it again. The Vanquish. You see it above me. Now, the Vanquish left around 2023, I believe, 2022, 2023, that they stopped making the Vanquish. Now, obviously, it hasn't been that long, but they weren't talking about there being a replacement for it. They made the DB11. They're over there making wild, basically, F1 cars with bodies and doors, a Valkyrie. They've hinted at other, like the Valhalla supercar. They've hinted at other things that they've been doing, but the Vanquish is kind of just sitting in the background. It's like, yo, where is this going to be? Where is it at? And the Vanquish has a very, I think, important part when it comes to the exotic car realm. Like, the Vanquish is a grand tour. Like, Ferrari has the 812 Superfast, and they have the new 12 1.2 cylindry or 12 cylinder is basically what I say it is. And that's another grand tour. But the Aston Martin has always had a little bit more of a luxurious connotation. It was more like, hey, you know this is fast. You know it's made for the Autobahn, but it's made for you to go out at night, to show up to the ball, to, you know, 007, you know, that whole elegance and that whole very cool factor, right? So the Vanquish is brand new. And they've redesigned the thing. You see how it looks. I love how this looks. Like I said before, some people argue that the previous generation Vanquish was tad bit cleaner. But like I said, we're splitting hairs. The cars all look good. I love how this one looks. Yes, the rear is more aggressive with the blacked out taillight section, with the rear diffuser. It is more of an aggressive take as opposed to it being a little bit more subtle, a little bit more toned down. But I appreciate it, right? It's not super leggera. It's not like that crazy one that they made, but I appreciate it. So what do we have? We have a V12. And let me repeat that again. A brand new block, cams, pistons, rods, you know, everything is new. New turbos, new exhaust manifold on a V12, which is important because Aston Martin has said that their new strategy is that the V12 will only show up in special cars, bespoke cars, cars that warrant the V12 name. They're not going to put it in the Vanquish, not going to put it in the Vantage. So we have 824 horsepower, 738 foot-pounds of torque, a top speed of 214 miles an hour, 0 to 63.2 seconds, 0 to 106.2, and an 8-speed automatic from ZF. Now, before we sing sad songs, we already knew it was going to be an automatic. You've seen the DB11. You've seen the Valkyrie, which has a dual clutch system in it, but you know that they don't put manuals in Aston Martins anymore, really. So if you really want a manual Aston Martin, like a Vantage or old Vanquish, I suggest you go buy one immediately because the ship's already sailed. There's a V12 manual version of a Vantage. They're not putting the V12 in a Vantage anymore. There are V8 manual ones left and right that are actually fairly inexpensive. So if you're thinking about a manual in Aston Martin, you better just hit up the Cars and Bids, bring a trailer, bring a auto trader, whatever you got to do, you better jump into that bandwagon. So we have an 8-speed ZF transmission. That is what is going to be inside of this car as well. We get new Bilstein, they call them DTX dampers, just a new suspension setup. They have 21-inch wheels, and the overall look when it comes to the outside, when it comes to the wheels, elegance, sexy, sophisticated, fire. You see how this looks? You can't deny it. I mean, if you look at a Vanquish and you're like, I mean, it only looks okay. Now, maybe you're one of those people that likes aggressive supercars, Lamborghinis and, GT3 RS's, wings and diffusers and canards. If you don't see that, then you may not be interested. But this, for the Aston Martin Vanquish, like if you ask me, I'll use myself as an example. If I had the means, the Aston Martin Vanquish would definitely be in the collection. And the reason why is because if you're doing like a date night, if you're going somewhere out, nice, elegant, you're trying to dress nice, look nice, go out to eat, but you still want to drive something that's special, still something that's kind of exotic, still something that's fast when it needs to be, but you don't want to be banging gears and hard suspension or dealing with, the visceral loudness of like a GT3 RS. This is where the Vanquish shows up. I mean, most of the people that do this is because they either want to have a long distance runner, something that they can drive for a long distance amount of time and still have the exoticness and the specialness of what the British have built when it comes to the Aston Martin. So the Vanquish is coming out end of this year, end of 2024, and you're going to need $429,000. That's before options. Now, you already know Aston Martin, when it comes to the leather options, carbon fiber, the trim, the interior, the outside, the paint, this is just the beginning. $429,000. I am positive you can get one of these up to $600,000, $700,000, depending on the options you have. Now, jumping from that, we're staying in the exotic car realm. I didn't get to talk about this car. It was announced a while back in like August sometime, beginning of August. But I was going to do a special episode on it. I never got around to it. That's my bad. But here's the car we're talking about. That is the Lamborghini Temerario. Now, I've talked about this car before. There's a prototype running around some country in full camouflage, and I talked about what it sounded like, what it looked like, what it was pertaining to be, and I can tell you this, I am not disappointed with how this car looks. I saw some different opinions on it. I think this looks iconic. Wedge shape, clean. Look at the futuristic elements, the rear diffuser with the simple taillights, but they're eye-catching. The color, the way it looks from the front, from the side, I think this is a perfect design and perfect look, especially when you compare it to what its predecessor, the Huracan, and before that, the Gallardo. So I think that we are going right down the same path. And now it is simple if you really think about what we were before. No, they're not blazing new trails. I think Lamborghini knows who their demographic is, right? They know what they're known for. They know what people want to see. So they're not about to rewrite the book. You already know what you're going to get yourself into is low-slung, wedge-style design, low to the ground. Same way they did with the brand new Revelto. Same look. But the V10 is gone. Cue in the Boys to Men. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday. But they didn't leave us hanging. Because usually when the companies, we already know this. Right now, the future deals with some turbocharging, it deals with some electrification, it deals with some hybrid setup, but the hybrid setup on these supercars, especially when you think about what Porsche did for the 911 T hybrid, A lot of these hybrid setups are benefiting in the performance aspect, and here's why I say this. 907 horsepower, 3 electric motors, 789 of them horsepowers come from a twin turbo V8 that redlines at 10,000 RPMs. That's crazy. Because if you think about that number, that's not far off from the flagship Revelto, which has 1,000. We're only 100 or less away from that, and we're in the smaller Temerario. So this is a very big deal. Considering that amount of power, you can only imagine that this thing is fast. 0 to 60, 2.7 seconds. Top speed, 213 miles an hour. 8-speed dual clutch. We already know there was no manual, so don't even waste your breath. Go get a Gallardo. Okay. And 13 driving modes. See, the cool thing about these hybrid setups is that because you have the electric motors, you have this torque vectoring and electric differentials and, in the front and the rear and the center, we have drift modes, we got drag modes, we got launch modes. I mean, it's a lot, but what it allows you to do is really hone in how this car is going to perform and how you want it to drive. So with this new Temerario, we have 13 driving modes, and one of those included drifting mode. Starting price, $290,000. I am sure we have many other versions coming. And I'm going to talk about this car more because, remember, I've talked about it a bunch. I know I haven't executed on what I'm talking about, but it's still there and we're working on it. That is me doing live series on the YouTube along with this podcast when it comes to configuring different things in different cars. This is one of them. I'm going to do it on one of these. Now, 590 foot-pounds of torque also. Very linear. One of the gentlemen that engineered this car said that the torque is available from 4,000 to 7,000 RPMs. And because of those electric motors, we're talking about instant torque, linear power delivery. So I only can imagine that when you're driving this car and you really step on the gas, you have that constant hit of torque pretty much to redline. I mean, I know the peak 590 stops at 7,000, but I mean, even if it tapers off, we're not tapering off that much. I mean, this thing is a rocket ship. It's not has to be. I can guarantee that it is, just given what they're doing. Now, flipping it to another side of the coin, just because I am who I am. I do wonder how the aftermarket, because of what they've been doing on Huracans and all these twin turbo kits, what they're going to be able to figure out when it comes to this car, considering how much power it has already. I don't know if the engine is rebuilt. I don't know if all those things are withstanding, but it's going to be real interesting to see what they come up with. Jumping out of the exotic cars for a minute. That might be it for the exotic cars, but listen, Vanquish, Temerario, if you got the money, you got options. I've said it plenty of times before. If you got Powerball money, then like your options when it comes to the 300,000 and all the way up to $2 million range of cars is like, it's better than us at the bottom. That's what's crazy. Like there are more options at 200,000 up to 2 million than there are at 50,000 to 25,000 for a fun car. Like we really are out in the dirt when it comes to what we got. If you only want to spend $40,000, your options are slim. Okay. Now let's get to something else. Now I've talked about this company a bunch, not in the greatest of light, because I really don't even know what their lineup's going to be. That's the Nissan. Nissan only has a Z and the GTR as far as my opinion goes for interesting cars. And the Z, it could have been more exciting. I know what they did for the formula. It was easy, cheap. They may not have that much money to try to develop something from the ground up, but they could have did a little bit more. But I'm here to talk about an SUV, which sounds crazy to talk about an SUV in some extra positive light, but I'm gonna give them their flowers when I see that they should be given, and that's on the new Armada. Now I know we're talking about a box on wheels, big SUV, 3 rows. It's boxy. What do you expect? I'm not saying it's winning the next Pulitzer Prize or some essence of design language at whatever gala. Okay, this is just a big American SUV for our market, but it's utilitarian, and I do think it looks a lot better than the previous Armada, and it gets back into the ethos of what these Armadas and the Pajeros and those SUVs kind of look like. It's very much squared off, but I do like the front grille. I think that the split chrome design matched into the headlights very well. And I do think that I talked about before that a lot of SUVs are getting away from the chrome accents. Here we go with the chrome accents. And I kind of like them. It's kind of contradictory from what I said before, where you don't really need chrome accents and things like that. And, you know, the aluminum and black is a better option. I'm not mad at the integration that they did here. So I'm going to give them that. But we have a few models. So the one that you see on the screen is red one is the Platinum Reserve, which is why it probably has the chrome on there. But there is a Pro 4X model, which is really being talked about because it has the all-new air suspension. It has 9.6 inches of ground clearance. Looks cool, different grille. You got the orange tow hooks. You got the metal guard. You got the all-terrain tires. It is the quintessential overland from the factory rugged package. This is the look that is popular now when you got TRD Pros on Tacomas and Sequoias and Tundras. And you see a lot of the companies doing. There's always some off-road version. There's always some version that kind of has a little bit more utility when it comes to it. The Platinum Reserve one, though, I want to talk about the interior. Now, the engine on both of these is a twin-turbo V6 that makes 425 horsepower and 516 foot-pounds of torque. That's across the board. There is no more V8. Cry a river. It's over. We already knew it was going to be over. That V8 was good. I mean, from what I remember. I don't really know the full history. It's not like I owned a Nissan Titan or anything like that with that V8, but I'm pretty positive that it wasn't one of the bad V8s or the bad motors that they had made. But interior wise, here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm looking at this picture and I really do like the way its interior looks. This is very much luxury, and we're not talking about an Infiniti QX80, which is based off of. This looks really good. Quilted leather, the brown leather, the split leather you see on the design. I like the way the dashboard looks, and I want to give a shout out to them on this because there was some restraint held here. There are still two big digital displays on the dash up to 14 inches. But if you look, they still kind of left regular dashboard on the side. It sounds crazy to say regular dashboard. But what I'm saying is I don't have a 40-inch screen covering the whole front end. It looks normal. It's angled towards the driver, who should be the one getting the infotainment. I know they try to do it for the passengers, give them screens and stuff to play with, but no passenger is going to want to stretch out to the dashboard to go get, you know, whatever little screen, you know, app is on there and to tap on it. That's not really even an intuitive design. But I do like how they held some restraint here. There's buttons still. The screens are large, but they're not obnoxious with how this one is designed. You still see some elements of a normal dashboard. I like the interior. You do get the same slew of normal features. Android Auto, CarPlay, wireless, power second and third row seats in the rear, power lift gate. You do get this cool like flood puddle light when you open the door that says since 1951, and it shows Armada on there on the screen. It looks cool. I mean, a lot of cars have like a logo or a symbol. This is a very big screen or a big symbol for what this car is. Now, like I said, interior wise, I think they did really well. I think it looks good. I think it looks good on the outside. I think it's a very good alternative to the idea of a Ford Expedition or even a Tahoe or even a Sequoia. I think this can do well. Given how this looks, and if Nissan is really trying to fight for like the Sequoia owners or the Tahoe owners, they might be doing some pretty good incentives. I don't know the price point on this. I'm sure looking at this Reserve, we're talking about a $50,000, $60,000 starting price point all the way up to probably like 70, maybe a little bit less, maybe 60 might be the cap off or 65, but it ain't going to be cheap necessarily given what I'm seeing. But kudos to Nissan and this Armada. I'm not mad at what I see. And keeping up with the SUVs, we're going to add one more in there we're going to talk about, and that was Volvo. Now, I know I just talked about utilitarian design, and it was boxy, and I can get with boxy because it's a big SUV. We're now going to kind of flip it on the other side because I'm a man of multiple ideas and multiple likes and desires, and I'm sure you are too who are listening to this. The XC90 got a little bit of a refresh, like a 2025.5 version of it, right? Which is going to be a little bit confusing. Drivetrains, powertrains are the same, even if you got a normal 2025 one you bought. But if you got this new mid-cycle refresh one, everything stays the same, except that they've cleaned up the front end even more, which the XC and Volvo design has always been clean. Like the Swedish know what they're doing when it comes to keeping understate, minimalist, very clean. Even their Polestar cars, even their electric cars, very clean design. So the front end has like tighter corners, right? If that makes any sense. Headlights are tighter, grille is tighter, smoothed out, very handsome, very sophisticated, very clean. It may not be as exciting as what we're normally used to with SUVs or polarizing, where you got to choose if you like it or you love it or you hate it. It's very middle of the road where it's like, this is clean. I can get with this. I can look at it for many years. It's not going to necessarily, excite you, but it won't get lost in the sea and it won't be polarizing to the point where you're like, why would you ever do something like that? But they've cleaned it up. I like how it looks on the outside, and they added another feature on the inside, which was the larger screen on the center dash. Now, I will give them some critique here. I wish the screen that they introduced for this larger setup was integrated better. This very much looks like tablet on dashboard, which is usually what happens when you put a big 13 to 12-inch screen on the dashboard. Now, if I flip it back to Nissan, who I was just talking about, that's why I said they integrated the sizing of a 12 to 14-inch screen a little bit better, in my opinion, than just sticking a portrait-style tablet on the dashboard. Now, I will give them something else. Volvo released probably the dopest looking second row cup holder, and yes, a cup holder, that I've ever seen in a car. Now look at this picture. The cup holds integrated into the armrest, and it kind of pops out, metal piece that holds it. I know it's odd. I'm just saying the cup holder on the second row captain's chairs is a very ingenious design. But Volvo is known for that. They put booster seats in the car that are built in, things that if you're a parent or you have kids or a family and you're big on safety and features, they pretty much knock it out the park with stuff that's just built into the car normally. So you can expect this to cost $60,000 to $81,000. It's going to come out later in the year. There are cool highlight features because this is a luxury SUV. I know Volvo stays so understated that sometimes people think that they're cheap until they get to the dealership and realize, oh snap, these folks ain't playing. You can get a 1410 watt Bauer & Wilkins 19 speaker stereo system, and I know it sounds like a symphony on wheels because it's Bauer & Wilkins. If you never heard their stuff, if you are privileged enough to live next to a store that's Bauer & Wilkins, go listen to their stuff. Now, continuing along, I want to get back to Nissan before I wrap this up. Nissan has been teasing the idea of a Silvia. And I know for all of us Silvia fans, my first car is a 240SX. Modified, we changed things, Silvia S13, all that stuff, right? For all of us that are from that JDM era, who love drifting, who love 240s and S chassis, hearing Nissan talk about a Silvia is like, it's too much of a tease. We don't even want to entertain it. We're like, man, stop playing with our emotions. If you're going to make a Silvia, make a Silvia. Stop talking, deliver. Here's the problem. What I'm hearing they're envisioning is a couple things that I want to talk about. So one, I think it was a CEO or somebody, one of the executives inside of Nissan who has been talking about this Silvia thing repeatedly, saying, I have a dream of a 3 sports car lineup when you have the GTR, the Z, and the Silvia. They envision the Silvia being an MX-5 fighter. Hold your thoughts. They also envision it being electrified by some form or fashion, whether it's all electric or it's hybrid. Now, the funny thing is that the executive, when he was talking about this, was saying that, oh, there's like no way it can't not be electrified in some way. Now, here's what I got to say. We are right now in the middle of all these manufacturers that are constantly changing what they thought was going to be the bread and butter of EVs being their main thing. Everybody's stopping. Everybody's changing them. Mercedes-Benz, for instance, said that the EQS line is going to phase out by 2030. They pushed that thing all the way to the forefront, saying this is our new luxury electric car. This is what we're doing. To come back around and say that the next electric car is just going to be an S-Class, which they should have did the first time, okay? If you're going to do an electric car, I do argue, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Make an electric version of the best-selling thing that you have. If Toyota makes an electric car, they may try to reinvent the wheel and say, we have a new lineup called the Toyota whatever. And now we have this new car. When I say make an electric Camry, Just make the electric version of it and sell it alongside the regular one and let the people that are interested trickle into that area. So here's what I want to talk about. The Silvia nameplate is like too special. And I mean this sincerely because it's too iconic. We got S13, 14, 15, and we're talking about a car that in your home in Japan is well known. We're talking about people like the Drift King and S15, the Signal Auto Silvia S chassis cars, the aero kits that they made from them from different companies, Artisan Spirit Rye. Like, you're talking about some of the most iconic brands in the JDM scene were making stuff and still are for the S chassis. So if you want to bring this back, an MX-5 fighter, I'm like, okay. I mean, I assume it could be that small, but the S chassis was very close or similar to the Z. If it was a 300ZX or a 280Z or whatever they were going at that time, it wasn't that far off. We're talking about the S15 having a turbocharged inline 4. So if you're making a new Silvia, my brain says two-door coupe, turbo 4, and you can slot it under the Z, make it have 250 horsepower, 300 horsepower. But I wouldn't say an MX-5 fighter because that's a very simplified roadster. That's a very smaller car. This should be much bigger. The electrification part of it too should be taken off the board because it's really not, to me, going to add up to something that's going to be desirable, especially if all the companies are coming back and saying, hey, we're switching all of our plans. We're flipping them upside down. Toyota's over here like, hey, we're making more gas-powered cars. We're making more gas engines. Mercedes is over here like, we're changing this up. BMW, Ford, everybody is changing something. So if you're going to introduce a new iconic nameplate, look at what Toyota's doing with the GR brand. If we got GR Corollas, GR 86s, GR Supras, and they are hinting at the next MR2 and the Celica having a turbo 4-cylinder, you're looking at a formula that's selling well. You got Honda over there with the Civic Type R. You got Acura with the Type S. You have Subaru with the WRX. You have Hyundai with an Elantra N, and they used to an Ioniq 5N, which is an electric car. But you see the difference in what I'm saying. We got exciting cars. So if you're going to release a Silvia, please, for the love, do not make some hybrid Silvia that's the size of an MX-5 and market it as I don't even know what. And please put a manual in it. I know automatics are the big seller. I know we got dual clutches, but listen, if Nissan wants to put themselves immediately back on top, you make a Silvia that's putting out 300 horsepower in a light chassis on a turbo 4. It's a strong motor because let's not be naive. We know people want to modify them. So if you have the forethought to say, how about we overbuild this engine just a little bit so that the aftermarket can kind of jump in there, throw on downpipes, this and that, E85, and find out that, hey, we built it to handle 600 horsepower or 500 or just something that they can play with, you will be right back at the top. So I don't know if anybody from Nissan listening to this, but please, if you want an idea for what the Silvia can do, ask the community who are currently fighting to buy $10,000 clapped out chassis. Okay, so if you want to find out what to do, go to a drift event. Ask the people there, say, hey, if we were to introduce a Silvia again, what would you want? And I can promise you it's going to be a very lightweight turbo chassis with a manual that looks good, that's highly modifiable, if that's even a word. But that's what they would like. And there you have it, episode 64. Now I'm going to wrap this up. GR Corolla updates. Not many. I have a part to put on. I do have some. I'm staring at an intake behind me, and behind this camera. You can't see, but I can see it. The car ran flawlessly from the East Coast back to Texas, from Texas to the East Coast. I drove it all around in the mountains around. I had a good time. The car performed flawlessly. I also did an update on the video. If you haven't, check out the YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, go check out my other videos on it. If you're listening to it, go and subscribe and like. Also to this podcast. But I did a video talking about the latest there's a ton of videos about the fires that happened on the GR Corollas. I say scandal, but it's not really a scandal. My video was talking about the car not catching on fire. Not that it did not happen, because some people just don't have any ability to understand context. Like, I'll make the video and I have comments like, what are you talking about? They did catch on fire. And I'm like, can't you understand like context and read through the lines and understand? What I was saying was that the overall idea that you got from people who never owned the car, or some people that did own the car, was that it was some fire risk. And I was saying, we got the same drivetrain and chassis as a GR Yaris. There are 25,000 GR Yaris's and more that have been sold over the seas in other countries, race, modified, daily driven, hundreds of thousands of miles. If there was an inherent defect in this motor that would cause spontaneous combustion, that motors would just up and flame themselves up, we would have already seen it. And these two cases have some questionable stories behind it. We're never going to get the full story. So the full story not being available, what happened is the warranty situation that Toyota denied, even though this is an insurance claim, because Toyota wouldn't have a warranty unless it was a defect on the motor that caused it. And if the entire car burned to the ground, then the insurance would kick in order to cover the difference, whether you had gap insurance or to get you another car. But I digress. The point of it was, people are mad at Toyota for saying that they denied a claim based on this idea that the tires weren't rated for high speed, because one of the gentlemen that called in Toyota got in hands with somebody at customer service who just said whatever. Again, context, reading between the lines. When I read that, I'm like, that's really nothing. That's not really what they're saying no to. There's more to the story, but they're just getting whatever the customer service people were told to say. But I made a video on it. It's doing well. People like the fact that I actually talked to the fact that the car is actually good. I don't care about what Toyota said about a warranty. I'm not saying that these companies are the best and that they don't do stuff that should be called out, because they do. They're corporations and they're not perfect. So I'm not trying to sing the song of Toyota can do no wrong. What I'm saying is, I'm driving a car, and so are many other people, built in the same factory, on the same assembly line. And I can tell you that if we had a problem, we should start seeing it. And if we do, because anything is possible, these are machines, then I'll report back about it. And until then, I hope you guys enjoy yourself. I hope you do as you wish and do as you may. As I always say, it's Cameron Biggs, your host. It's another episode of CarQuicks. I'm going to see y'all around. Take care. Peace.